Hi guys, right, highlighting. Okay, so we're going to cover a video now on essentially how we're going to look to highlight. So I'm using a very small Artis Opus Series D dry brush for this, and we've got three colours. Three colours are the minimum I use for highlighting. So on the bone areas, as you can see on the mini there, we're going to start off with a Creed Khaki, applying it with the dry brush. Remember the light source we discussed on, I think, the second video is top down, okay? So it's essentially the raised areas, anything underneath is going to stay on the original colour that it was washed in. So we'll start with the Creed Khaki, followed by the Screaming Skull, and then some Pallid Witch Flesh. This is really good stuff to make your miniature pop. It's like an off-white with a little bit of yellow. And that's the same principle with all the other colours on the miniature. So we'll repeat the process with a grey for the smoke. We'll repeat the process with a yellow for the cabling and the blue that sits in between. Just a caveat, we're using a dry brush on this, but actually when you come to some of the finer work, it's actually better to use a layering form of highlighting. So the only difference is there that you would use basically a fine detail brush, exactly the same process, and just over the top. Make sure that your paints are really watered down for this, not to the point where they're a wash consistency, but they need to be able to move freely upon the on the miniature. So we'll cover those. I'm going to cover all the highlighted areas, including the red, and we'll show you the product afterwards. Hi guys, right, so that's the highlighting done. If you remember, we discussed about using a minimum of 3 colours. So the example I gave in the previous video was that of the skull, so using essentially bone type colours, a minimum of 3. If you remember, the light source was at the top of the miniature down, so if you look underneath, slightly darker complexion moving to a lighter transition. And the way we've done that is using the Artis Opus extra small brush and the wetting pad, as well as the texture pad here. So essentially a little bit of paint, moved it around, dry brushed off, and then applied it to the miniature. Worth having a look at their website if you want some really in-depth tutorials on the way in which they do their dry brushing. I don't really do it justice, but they're really good. So like I said, minimum 3. So the 3 examples I've got here is the reds, a bit of corn red, followed by GHAZGHULL red, and then an Evilson Scarlet, which actually looks like a sort of orange pigment at the end, and that's come out with some really good results on the sort of the mandible. There, okay, so almost sort of airbrushing type. Now I've also done GHAZGHULL's face with a sort of yellow underglow from the lighting. That's actually within the mini. What I will do at the end of this video is take some stills of this and then stick up on my Instagram account, 40k Ollie, if anybody's interested. So what I've also done as well is in the yellow on the cabling. It's exactly the same process, but if you look underneath, there's no highlight in there because the light source is at the top down. Okay, so it gets lighter up the cabling, darker underneath, and it gives it really nice contrast. Finally then, Stormho Silver, excellent piece of kit, this one. So if we move GHAZGHULL around and look at his claw, that's allowed us to highlight some of the edges in the light and dull down some of the complexion in the dark. So the lower edges of his claws are not highlighted, but the top edges are, and that just allows the miniature to pop. Now you'll notice also the detail work here. Now these are actually transfers that I've used. So I've cut the ones that I want out, and we're just going to talk about the use of Microsol and Microset. So these are 2 products that you can buy essentially to make the transfers very malleable and pliable. So I don't know if you've ever had this where you've tried to put a transfer over a sort of dome piece of the miniature, such as like a Space Marines armour pad. Very difficult to use to do well. So what I tend to do is allow the transfer to set on the miniature using this. So I will apply with a clean brush some Microset. It's essentially the same as water, same consistency, over the area in which I'm putting the transfer. I'll then lay the transfer on top, brush it flat, and allow it to set for about 25 minutes. So at that point then I'll move to Microsol. Now Microsol is essentially the product that starts to make the transfer malleable. So I'll apply 2 or 3 coats of Microsol and then start to smooth out the transfer, and you'll start to see the transfer become malleable and you can smooth it into all the creases. Once that's completed, on this miniature I've used a small Artis Opus Series D brush to do some stippling. So essentially with a grey, or in my case I've used a bolt gun metal, basically stipple the paint onto the end of the brush and then just stipple over the top of the transfer. And what that allows it to do is to blend in. So you'll see there that it's blended quite neatly into the shoulder pad with the original colour. And that's the same at the back there, skull and crossbones, and the backs of his calves. Once that's completed, I then give that a single coating of matte varnish, and then it'll allow it to set. There are some instances, if you're doing sort of glazed armour, that it's worth putting a clear varnish over the top, so it makes the transfer look like it's actually being painted into the miniature. And then over the top of that, to reduce the shine, you then put a matte varnish over the top. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comment section, and I can do a separate tutorial on actually how to apply transfers using Microsol and Microset, and then actually how to get a decent effect of it sort of blended into the miniature. Final touch on the GHAZGHULL miniature was basically some grass, dead easy. You can buy these off the shelf at Games Workshop, they're just tufts. And what I'll do now is I'll put some stills up of this miniature in a light box onto my Instagram account, so you can actually see some of the detail. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. I was really intimidated by this miniature when I first sort of pulled it out of the pack and then put it together and thought this is going to be a nightmare to paint. I've got to be honest, it's been pretty straightforward. So if you like this this tutorial, please let me know. If you've got any suggestions for others, let me know if there's anything you'd like to see painted. I'm a big Blood Angels collector. I've got some Primaris stuff on the go at the moment, and I think I'll probably do a Mephiston shortly as well. Okay, all for free, all just for the fun of the hobby. I hope it helps people out. Like I said, you know, this is about painting miniatures to a good solid gaming format, not painting them to be Golden Demon winners. You know, so if you want battle ready and looking good for a weekend game or a sort of weekly game, look no further. Cheers guys.